Welcome. I'm very happy to see you all here tonight. I see some familiar faces and some new ones too. So if you don't know me, my name's Catherine Feerick. I'm the Director of Land Use and Economic Development for the town. And what we're going to be talking about tonight, which seems to be of great interest to the whole town, is the stretch along Neponset Avenue that's owned by Schneider Electric, formerly Invensis, formerly the Foxboro Company, which is going to be going up for sale soon. The reason we're talking about this tonight and during the summer, I know that it's awful with vacations and things like that, but we are making other means that people can contact us. We have a website set up. We have a survey going out to folks. We're really trying to get feedback to figure out if we should put anything before town meeting this autumn for a vote. That way, any changes that we might make will come into effect before the property's transferred and before it's ultimately developed. There are a lot of misconceptions and things like that that I've been hearing, so I'll do my best to try to address those as I go through my presentation. And I think that the first one, and where I'll start, is that the town is not buying Schneider Electric's property. A lot of people seem to think that that what we're here to talk about tonight is about what the town should build on this land, but it will not be the town that will be the buyer. This is going to be a private transaction between Schneider Electric and whoever decides that they want to pay a market rate for the land and agrees with Schneider Electric on the price. So that's the first thing that I'll say, just to guide this conversation. And you might wonder after that, why are we talking about a private sale between two people? Why don't we just stay out of it? And there's a lot of merit to that, and we might end up deciding not to take anything before town meeting, and that's absolutely an option. But I do think that when you have 55 acres of land that's going out to sale in any community, that's a huge deal. It would be planning malpractice to not talk to the residents, to not figure out what, if any, changes people want to see to the use along this corridor. So that's why we've invited you tonight. And again, welcome to this conversation as we discuss this very, very important piece of property in the town. Unfortunately, I have to go through the slides by pressing a button down here, so bear with me as I do so. So the goals for tonight, again, discuss the pending sale of Schneider Electric land along Neponset Avenue and clarify any misconceptions. Secondly, identify land uses that are desired by the community, as well as uses that residents want to avoid. Third, discuss how the town can use zoning to guide future development along the corridor. Zoning is a tool that all communities have at their disposal, that they can place restrictions on land use in certain areas and guide development in that manner. And finally, determine whether there's enough interest from residents to pursue a zoning change at town meeting and whether or not there's enough consensus, because with zoning changes you need a 2/3 vote at town meeting. That's a lot of Foxborough residents that have to be on the same page when it comes to a vision for the future. Is that possible? I don't know. And that's what we're here to discuss tonight. This may be an endeavor that we all go through, and the majority of Foxborough residents want a certain pattern of land use along Neponset Avenue, but not enough to get to that 2/3 threshold. So it's something to keep in mind. It's a limitation when it comes to the town form of government in Massachusetts. It's a good thing in many ways, but it can also cause, opportunities like this to be a little more challenging. So the details of this project site. Again, like I said, it's approximately 55 acres of land. The boundaries may change between here or there, but for the most part, it runs along Neponset Avenue from just north of Mechanic Street on the south to Chestnut Street on the north, a little south of Chestnut Street. It involves former industrial land, it involves former surface lots and outbuildings that were used for industrial purposes but are not contaminated. Some of the properties are contaminated, some are deeply historic and have been preserved. Others, as you've probably all seen, have been demolished over the course of this past year. So it's a lot of land. It's in various states of development. Mostly it's flat, mostly it's developable. It does have environmental contamination, like I said. That would be very costly for the buyer to remediate to the point that they could build certain uses on it. For example, the post-World War II buildings that were demolished, they left the slab in there because very likely there's no way that it would make financial sense to clean that up to the level that you would expect for like an office building or residential, for example. It will probably always remain an industrial use there. So there are certain portions of the site that have limitations, and we'll go over those as we proceed tonight. But just know that the contamination issue is absolutely understood by town staff. It is something that the future buyer will have to consider. On what we're doing tonight is talking about land use. So we don't necessarily have to consider contamination when it comes to what we want to go there. It's going to be up to the ultimate buyer of the land to make it work if it can work. Finally, the context of this land is that it's very near the uptown area, near the town common. It's also very close to the Chestnut Green area, the former state hospital property. So this is a very dense, very historic part of Foxborough. It's a part that most people know very well. You've traveled along this corridor many times yourselves, I'm sure. Many of you hopefully live along the corridor. We did send you mailers, so hopefully some neighbors are here tonight. So it's a very important piece of property. It's also bounded to the left by a railroad line. So that also presents some limitations when it comes to land use that you should be aware of. They should factor into your decision potentially. But at the end of the day, zoning is different from what's ultimately built in an area to an extent, but it's a guide that we can impose upon developers. We can say you can build this here, you absolutely can't build that there. You build to this level of density, but not that level of density. There are a lot of different parameters in zoning. We'll talk about that as we go. But when it comes to the site itself, there's a rail line, there's the corridor itself, a surface lot, contaminated land here that has been demolished from the former structures, the historic Foxboro Company building, which has been preserved. There's another parking area here. There's a property in this corner called the Flow Lab. This is an area where Schneider Electric and previously Invencis did water testing and other lower impact uses, so potentially developable. And this area here is actually not owned by Schneider Electric and not part of this, this discussion tonight. It's owned by a series of small businesses and residences. So that's the context. So the first part of this session tonight, and I really do hope that it can be very interactive. We do have a microphone and we'll have to run it around to you, unfortunately, unless we're able to find a microphone stand for you tonight. But the first discussion is going to be what do you want to see along Neponset Avenue, and also, and for some of you more importantly, what don't you want to see along Neponset Avenue. So I want to guide it first and just get a quick show of hands as to types of uses. There are two slides here. This is just to get the conversation started and to get you thinking. And I know that this is going to be very small, especially for the folks in the back, so I'll just describe these images as well. So the first one is taken from actually a location that was suggested to us by one of the neighbors. It's called Tuscan Village in Salem, New Hampshire. It's a walkable shopping district of sorts. It's more suburban in layout. It would require a lot of parking, but they do have retail shops and restaurants and things like that along a walkable corridor that looks somewhat historic and traditional in terms of its design. It is a few stories high, as you can see. That could be office above, it could be residential above. I don't know what it is, to be honest with you, in Tuscan Village, but it's a walkable shopping district. So let's get a show of hands for anybody who would like to consider at least that option. Okay. All right.
Order. Can you hold up in the hands until all four?
Yes, we're going to go through each one of them. Yeah.
Well, I don't know until I hear the other three.
No. You raise your hand for any of them that you want to consider is what we're doing tonight.
All right.
Yeah. And then after we go through all of these,
I don't need the mic either.
after we go through each one of these categories of development types, you'll have the opportunity to weigh in and speak personally on this, okay? So the next one, this is a warehouse. Now this is mostly what's being built right now in industrial districts. It does require a special permit in Foxborough, but recently because of the rise of e-commerce, these are much more common than seeing an actual industrial working factory come up. So I included a warehouse as one of the potential uses along this site. A show of hands for people who would be interested in just considering this use. Okay. The next one is an actual industrial use, I took an image, it's an LG, but it's not going to be LG, obviously. So this is a use where you're going to have a multitude of different parts. You're going to have some kind of assembly work. You might have some technology and research and development activities going on. It's similar to what Schneider Electric's doing at their Comcast location, right? It's a working industrial concern. So that's the third one. Any show of hands for considering this? Okay. The fourth one is a lower impact retail district. So it's a traditional strip. It's a little bit higher end. I did try to include one that had some uses like a financial advisor office and an Ulta Beauty, because that's the kind of demographics that Foxborough has. It would be able to attract a higher end sort of strip development. But it's one of the traditional strip mall type retail districts with the building in the back, the parking in the front. You see them everywhere. Any show of hands for this type of development? All right, next slide, and then we'll get to free discussion. The next one is a traditional residential style. I tried to find a residential picture that roughly approximates what's in the neighborhoods surrounding this. It's older housing stock, it's more affordable housing stock with a small a. These are what some people call starter homes. Some people just like them because there's less of a lawn to have to take care of. But it's a more traditional, compact sort of housing, single-family home neighborhood district. Can I get a show of hands for people who would want to consider that?
Would they be for sale or for rent?
For sale. Well, I mean, we can't dictate that, obviously, because we're the town. But for us, we just allow the land use. But typically, projects like this are for sale.
Did you say they were houses or apartments?
Single-family homes. Yeah. The next one is an auto shop. Now, these are things that are allowed within industrial right now, so it's something that could potentially go into this district no matter what, because, well, we'll talk about that later, but they can grandfather in the use of the land right now. So it's its own general industrial. It could remain general industrial even if we decide to change the zoning because it's already allowed in that area. So anybody for like an auto repair type shop or something similar like that, like a towing company or fill in the blank, something similar. Any hands?
Does that include a gas station? Give you gas right
I don't know. I forget gas station. Could you look that up? We'll get back to you on that.
You mentioned an auto repair shop. Where are you saying that it's grandfathered?
So anything that's general industrial right now, they can apply for a special permit as long as they meet those conditions. They can locate there.
Where the cafeteria is?
Anywhere along the stretch, pretty much. Almost all of this land is currently zoned general industrial. There are just a couple patches that are zoned R15, which is a residential zone. So pretty much anywhere they could build that.
So they would need a variance to put housing?
Well, you would need either a zoning change. You couldn't really do it with a variance, but you'd need a zoning change of some sort.
That would require a town meeting?
Yes, exactly. So the next one is what is currently going on with the new build construction for multifamily units. They tend to be very large buildings. And I kind of have a temperature from all of you folks already about this, but I have to ask it anyway because it's part of my job as a planner. So any hands for the typical multifamily that's being built today? Okay. And finally, small scale retail. These are single story retail, neighborhood scale, things that could potentially be, a draw for the people that live around the neighborhood itself. They probably wouldn't be a magnet for people elsewhere in the town. Really like a service corridor type of development at a neighborhood scale. Any hands for that type of use? Okay. Okay. So far, do you have an answer for me?
Yeah, the motor vehicle fuel facility would be allowed with a special permit from the zoning board of appeals in the general industrial.
Okay, so within the current zoning, to answer your question, within the current zoning, you would need a special permit in order to build a gas station along the corridor. But again, as long as they meet the conditions required for the permit, it can't be denied as a use.
Thank you.
All right. General questions, I think we're ready for that because we've gone through the hands. And I beg your patience, where we just have to get the microphone set up. Back in the back corner was the first hand up, very back corner.
I'd like to speak quickly. Are there any examples from us?
For the record, I do work for the company, but do not represent the company in any way in this matter. I am Switzerland. I don't see any examples of green space use or possible zoning and/or youth enrichment that's beautiful. Let's, for example, a baseball field or something that's pretty and nice and follows a lot of the character of what I believe is a central core of this town is our youth and their development. Thank you.
Thank you. That's... Thank you so much. That's a really great question. I heard a lot of comments, and I may have actually read yours because you used words similar to a Facebook response.
I don't write good.
No. I think I recognized from reading your comment. There were a lot of comments that echoed you. A lot of people who want to see more green space, more wilderness, more youth engagement and opportunities. Those, unfortunately, because the town isn't the one buying the property, we can't really dictate that. We don't have a zoning category that is cannot build here. There's a conservation commission which can acquire land, be granted land, and then preserve that land in perpetuity. But we can't force the new developer to build conservation land. The exception being there are certain types of single-family home developments where they can build a little bit denser than we typically require and then keep a big chunk of land for conservation. So that is an area where they can do that, but it's not likely to be a portion of the zoning itself. We can't zone for green space, unfortunately.
One more side item, but that's not the end of, excuse me, not confrontation, but that's not the end of the conversation. In fact, things can change through committees and town meetings and that sort of thing, and/or corporate sponsors that want to create and maintain a green space as their own, say, community outreach programs.
Yes, very much agreed. A lot of developers, when they have specifically, I mean, from what Schneider's told me, they want to limit the number of buyers. So you're going to be looking at larger scale developers that are going to be building a lot of different things on their plots of land. And typically when you have something like that, those buyers are really willing and eager to do like a good faith gesture to the community of some sort. And a lot of the comments that I've received, things like a bike path, things like green space, things like activities for residents and youth, we will be keeping a list of those things and providing it to both Schneider Electric and whoever the ultimate buyer is, and saying, look, like this is the town's wish list. This is what residents really want. Obviously, we can't force you to do these things, but it would be really nice if you did them, and especially if you're asking us for concessions on the development side to loosen some of our parameters or our requirements for you. We'd really like you to do this. So it's not something that we can require, but absolutely, I'm still writing down every comment as it comes in when it comes to the items like what you've addressed, because I think that that's very important and part of this conversation as well.
Thank you.
How about there?
Do we know who the potential buyers would be? Do we know who the potential buyers might be?
We don't yet. So again, all I know from Schneider Electric is that they want to limit the ultimate number of buyers, which means that they're probably going to be deeper pocket investors of some sort. We know that they are going to do a real estate market analysis on their end to try to find out what the most lucrative possible end uses could be. They will be constrained by this conversation. As of now, all they can build there is general industrial, but they're aware that we're talking to the residents about this. And again, I'll talk about some of the weaknesses with zoning later, but they're aware that the residents could vote to change zoning ultimately. I can repeat the question if need be.
Has there been any talk with the state or the governor about the potential purchase?
No, it hasn't risen to that level from our perspective. Typically, if something goes to the state level, it's because they're seeking an incentive of some kind, and that incentive can vary widely based on what Schneider Electric decides to do. If they sell it to a biotech company, then maybe they're going to be seeking research and development tax credits. If they sell it to somebody who specializes in warehousing or something like that, maybe they're talking to the state about an abatement program of some sort or a job creation program. It really depends on the end use, but that doesn't come from the town. Up here.
Yeah,
Can you wait? Sorry.
Mark Powers, Prospect Street. A few years ago, a project went through our town. It was called Friendly 40B, and I don't believe that required any town approval. It went from the select board to the zoning board. Would this piece of property be subject to that?
Not to my knowledge. I'm not familiar, I've been on the outsides of friendly 40Bs, but the community that I served before, typically they did not want to go through the 40B process, and they would be more helpful to developers in order to avoid it. But I don't think that friendly 40Bs are something that we would be required to do as a town. I know that we exceed our threshold in affordable units, so.
Select board decided.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that scenario, unfortunately. I can't speak to it.
The select board could still opt to go that route if they were asked to do so. But we have not heard anything bubbling around that.
Okay,
That's
so.
always a case-by-case decision because we are over the 10%.
Sure. So just to reiterate for folks that can't hear, that is still an option that the select board can decide to do. But it's on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. And far in the back, there's a lady in a white shirt that's been waiting.
Hi, Corinne Griffin on Baker Street. My question is about if there was a rezoning for residential. As of right now, it is my understanding that as an industrial zoning of space, those tax dollars are then not depleted upon like our school systems, whereas residential, we would be bringing in more people, especially single families, so children would be incoming into our school systems. And then that would mean that the tax dollars of residents would need to increase to counterbalance what has been an industrial zoning in the past. And I want to make sure that that's being considered because if you have kids in our school systems, our schools are getting full. There's a lot of towns around us that are going through fiscal crises because of the influx of that without having big business tax dollars being paid into the town budget. I just wanted to make sure that was something that was being considered if there was a possible rezoning for residential rather than industrial.
Absolutely, that is always a concern. So when it comes to a municipal tax receipt pie, industrial businesses pay more as a tax rate than single-family homes do. And typically, you are correct, single-family homes almost never pay the amount into the system that they require in services. The uses that do are commercial uses, industrial uses, and occasionally multifamily residential, but single-family homes, that is a consideration that everybody here should be aware of, is that they typically don't hold their weight when it comes to tax receipts. Good, very good comment.
I just have a simple question. Can you just clarify on the map where the group is that is residential?
Sure.
The water group was?
Uh-oh. So there are a couple of areas that have residential that are near this district. There's residential along Pond Avenue, Fox Hill.
Far down, but you said that some of this available land is already.
In terms of zoning, okay, yeah, we have a zoning map later on. Let's talk about that. Let's see where it is. So, yeah, here's the map that shows the different zones. The green hatched area is the actual project site itself, and the one that's zoned residential R15 is right here is one little piece right behind Mechanic Street. There's one little piece that's zoned R15 underlying, and where's the other one? There's two, right?
Bradford Avenue.
Bradford Avenue. There's a tiny little finger of it, so really not developable.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's one. Can you go back? Oh, no, there's a lady in a navy blue shirt back there. She's had her hand up for a bit.
Hi, I think most of this has been addressed. There was a difference between the commercial tax rate as opposed to residential. So anything residential, conservation, that would bring in a lot less money, correct?
Correct, yes.
The cluster zoning concept, I think you were kind of alluding to it earlier, But that's been used in a lot of towns. And they, under that concept, depending on who's designing it, they can designate whatever they want for open spaces, green spaces. And I was thinking that particular area, of course, it wouldn't bring as much money, which might not go well overall. But if you have the cluster zoning where you have a certain area in terms of your single family or condos, whatever they decide to do in one area, but that would open up a lot of land spaces, those parking lots, to pretty green parkways, conservation areas, benches for people to wander around and, you know, just particularly beautify it. But the Foxboro company itself, and I haven't kept up on this particular one, so I don't know ultimately what the future of that historic building is. But nobody's mentioned the idea of educational people or companies or schools coming in. And that would be an ideal place to have some kind of, even in keeping with conservation, some kind of community college add-on, or maybe private companies where you could offer certification programs, not college degrees, actually, but in other words, involving the idea of conservation, preserving the land. And my question was really that money-wise, how would that affect the
Sure. So the last part of that question, since the mic cut out, was how would a use like that affect the fiscal impact of this project getting developed? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Because ultimately it's about money. I think probably
Sure.
it's a private sale.
So I'll address your first point first. When it comes to the cluster style development that I was talking about, it comes to us from developers. It's not allowed for anybody to just come in and say, we're going to give you this as conservation land. The development team has to come to us, prove that it's conservation land worth having, so that we don't get a whole bunch of junk land that's not actually worth anything. You know, they have to prove to us that it's good, solid conservation land, first of all. And secondly, we can't designate it. We can't lay it out and say, you have to give us this piece. It has to come from them, and they have to show us that they can preserve that land and build according to our requirements. So it's not really something that we can do up front. It's something that we review on the back end. A lot of planning is actually done after the fact. It's not done beforehand. 80% of the work is actually projects that come into us that we have to analyze and assess. It's only 20% that's this kind of like forward thinking stuff. The second point, anywhere in the town could be an educational facility. That's covered under what we call the Dover Act in Massachusetts. So it's an educational use can go into any zone that we have. We can't zone against it, and we have to allow it no matter where it goes. Typically, educational uses are like nonprofit or municipal, so they're not going to bring in an awful lot of revenue to the town. But they can be considered when it comes to things that you would like to see here. It has been mentioned to me before that an educational use could be a really good fit here, specifically because of the technology that's going on and the possibilities for integrated learning opportunities. So it's definitely something to keep in mind and to record on our wish list, but it's not something that unfortunately we can zone for. One more question, then I want to get back to it. In the back.
Hi, thank you. Colin Nelson, Chestnut Street. So the Foxboro company was kind of notorious for, dumping heavy metals and chemicals into the Neponset reservoir. Now this is an industrial zone, and we're proposing now residential and possibly commercial zoning as well for this. Now, how can we reconcile the levels of pollution that have been added into the soil? Is the Schneider Electric company taking care of that? How is that being addressed? Because if we're putting houses there, presumably for people to bring their families and children, we have heavy metals in the soil. How are we reconciling that
Sure.
For residential zoning? Thank
Great.
you.
So great question, and another one that I've been hearing a lot of people with a lot of concerns about that. So first and foremost, I'm not proposing residential anywhere. Like, I'm a town planner in Massachusetts, which means that my role is limited to trying to make sure that the town's in compliance with state regulations and trying to figure out what the resident consensus is, because I need a 2/3 vote at town meeting. So my role isn't to dictate uses right now. I'm trying to listen to you all to figure out what's acceptable to you. So that's the first point. The second point, residential uses require much higher environmental standards than any other uses, because the assumption is that somebody could be at home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the soil typically on a brownfield site is what you call like a contaminated old factory site. The soil has to be cleaned up. Sometimes it has to be picked up and trucked off site and barriers put down and things like that if you want to even consider a residential use. It's very, very expensive. There's a reason that Schneider Electric left the slab where those post-World War II buildings are, because it would be very expensive to do anything other than industrial up there. It probably wouldn't make any sense to put any kind of residential there. That said, because it's zoning, we can say that that's what we want potentially. They can grandfather in the industrial use and do it there anyway. You know what I mean? Zoning is kind of a complicated science, but that particular part, the most contaminated site along this entire corridor, I don't foresee ever being residential. Okay, just one more question, and then we've got to keep going, because I do want to explain zoning. It's a very technical field.
My name is Gail Kaiser, I live on Ridge Road, and a couple of things I'm curious about is what I see now, and I'm imagining the neighbors, when everything was being torn down, the noise and everything else that they had to put up with. I could hear it in my street, and some days it was really bad, and I can't imagine the other neighbors. My question to you is, in your pictures, whether residential or commercial, what is going to happen to the foundation that is laying vacant right now? Are they going to tear it up, meaning more noise, or are they going to tear it down? If they tear it down, what are they going to do to Gudgeon Brook? Are they going to open it up or keep it covered? And that also includes Robinson Brook, which feeds off of Gudgeon Brook. And Gudgeon Brook goes to the lake in Neponset, and the Robinson Brook goes the other way through Foxborough.
Right.
So my question on those is, what's going to happen to that foundation? Because what I see you have there, either residential or commercial, what is going to happen as far as the sewer?
Mm-hmm.
I know that they have a plant of their own, but looking at what might be proposed, that's an awful lot of sewer going into a possibility of a area that can't handle it. So that needs to be answered before anything is done.
Sure.
And,
Thank you. So as of now, what I can tell you is that Schneider Electric has no plans to remove the block of pavement over Gudgeon Brook. They intend to keep it sealed the way that it is. Whoever the buyer is, they might decide to tear it out, but they probably won't. Like I said, that would be incredibly expensive to try to remediate the soil that's underneath it. So my guess is, and this is my guess,
okay, did they cover up all the entrances that they had from the machine shops and everything else that went into Gudgeon Brook?
I could not tell you that myself. I don't directly supervise demolition projects, but our building commissioner was given their plan, followed up with the plan. A lot of what you're talking about is at the state level. DEP has been monitoring this site as well.
Well, a long time ago, they weren't much help.
Right. So, I mean, the environmental issue is a big one. But when it comes to land use, we cannot tell people that because of environmental restrictions, your land is negative value, you can't sell it for anything, and the people who buy it can't develop it. We just can't do that. It's a capitalist country, and we have prohibitions against removing the value of people's land entirely. If people have enough money to pay to remediate it according to state and local laws, then they're allowed to do so. So when it comes to land use, I want to think about like context, and we have to assume that the systems that we have in place to protect the health and welfare of people, including licensed site professionals, the regulations that the state lays, which are very strict when it comes to environmental controls, we have to, just assume that they're going to work the way that they're supposed to. I know that there have been situations in the past where there's been disagreement on that, but when it comes to zoning, there's nothing that I can do about that.
What about the railroad?
The railroad?
Yeah, that goes right through there.
There's nothing I can do about that.
Will there be the possibility of having a station there?
Having a station there. I think, I mean, that's not up to me, obviously. It has to go through the owner of the rail line, and I don't know if is that freight or is that passenger? I think it's freight. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I see the train, when you're looking at land use, I see the train mainly as something that you have to consider from like the people who will either live, work, or shop there. Like, it's a disturbance. Anybody who's ever lived against a railroad line knows that they are very loud, even if you have the best sound canceling windows. So, as a planner, I would think right against the rail line, even if you were allowed to build all the way up to it, you should not ever have residential, and because now we know this. In the past, we didn't know that. Right, but that's not like right against the tracks.
Excuse me. Can we allow Catherine to finish her presentation? Thank you.
Yeah, the rail line is absolutely an impediment that needs to be considered, but from a use perspective, like what we're talking about here is land use. So there are a lot of different things that factor into land use: environmental concerns, the needs of the people that live there when it comes to amenities and beauty and green space and all of that, transportation. All of this needs to be factored in, but the land use itself is what we're discussing tonight, and whether or not to change the land use. Allow it to remain industrial, and it will remain industrial. And that could be what everybody decides, and that's fine, but that's what we're here tonight to discuss. Oh, this is the zoning page. So for people who aren't familiar with zoning, it's a term that I've been using a lot tonight, but very simply, it's local regulations that govern how land can be developed. It doesn't change what's on the land now. You can change zoning on an existing single-family home and make it industrial if you want to, right? And what it does is it sets a future ability for the development of that land. You want this to be a more money-making portion of the town, maybe, or you've had health issues around an existing industrial area, and that's why you're zoning it industrial. It doesn't change what's on the land now, it changes what could be built there in the future. It also determines density. You can set different dimensional requirements. You can say that nothing can be built closer than 10 feet away from the roadway, for example, or you have to have 10 feet from the property line on either side, something like that. So that's all zoning. It's a code, it's legal, it's complicated. It goes through an office like ours and a body of residents that volunteer to review projects to make sure that anything that's built in the town conforms to what's written in those bylaws. Zoning is really influential, but there are 3 drawbacks that I really need to discuss with you. The first one I've already discussed a few times, and that's that Schneider Electric could grandfather in the use as it stands now. The whole parcel is used as industrial land. It has been used as industrial land. So the state cannot, they won't allow us to say, no, from this point onward, you absolutely can't build industrial here, because it's already there. The assumption is it's not causing that big a deal. Most of the people who live around it were aware of it before they bought their homes. You can't snatch that ability away from a buyer to completely cut them off from what the land currently is used for. The second limitation, residents can't demand any single use. So zoning is not something where we can say, all of us want an amusement park, roller coasters along Neponset Avenue are the way to go. You need to build that, you can't build anything else. We can't do that with zoning. We have to allow market conditions to factor into it. So they're broad categories of things that you can and can't do on the land that you own. They're not things that the residents can get together and just shoehorn Schneider Electric or whoever buys the land into, you must do this. The third limitation, like I said, changes to zoning require a 2/3 vote at town meeting. That's a high threshold. Not only does everybody basically need to agree that the zoning should change, everybody needs to agree what it's going to change to. So, we could have the population of Foxborough divided into thirds, and 1/3 thinks that it should stay the same that it is right now. A second third should think all industrial along the rail line and all residential on the other side of the street. And then the third group could say, no, we want all farmland through the whole area. Just as a logic exercise, we would never get to a 2/3 vote at town meeting. The zoning would stay what it is now. It would be general industrial, and that would be the category that the new buyer is going to be forced to consider for their business model. So that's what zoning is. It's not a perfect system, and it involves heavily on you all. Me as a town planner, I studied this stuff in grad school. I've been doing it for a while, but I'm not the one that has any say in what happens. It's all of you here tonight. So if you decide that you do want to change the zoning, that's great. We can form subcommittees, we can have lunch and learns, we can discuss all the different options that are available to us. But if people decide that they either don't want to change it or they can't agree on what the end use is, that's not going to be something that I'm going to bring before town meeting, because I know it's not going to pass. So I just want everybody to understand that. If you can hold off for just a bit, there's going to be another opportunity for questions just after the next piece here. We already discussed the existing zoning previously. I do want to discuss overlay districts with you, because this is one of the methods that's worked on large pieces of property in the town before. A lot of you are familiar with the state hospital property. Chestnut Payson is our overlay district for that. It's located directly to the north of the Neponset corridor, and that is an overlay district, which means that the underlying zoning stays the same. There are parts of it that are R15, and parts that are R40, parts that are general business. Whatever it may be, that underlying zoning remains. But the overlay district allows for a broader set of possibilities for the site. So the future developer can plan it as a campus rather than doing it piecemeal, parcel by parcel by parcel, and asking for variances and asking for zoning changes and things like that every time they need to do something. For a larger piece of property, sometimes it makes a lot more sense to do an overlay district. Whether or not residents want to consider this option, it is an option. You could either take one of the existing ones that we have. This one here is for the uptown neighborhood, the Foxboro Center Overlay District, and this one here is the Chestnut Payson Overlay District, both within walking distance of this site. So it is an option that you should be aware of. It's not one that I necessarily am going to endorse to you, but it's something that I do want you all to be aware of and to consider. So when it comes to the options for future zoning, like I said, option one, we could decide not to change zoning. The area is going to continue to be general industrial. Whoever buys this 55 acres has to find uses that reflect that general industrial character. So that means that you could have heavy truck traffic, you could have some air quality issues, you could have any number of things that come along with having an industrial use there. Second, residents could opt to change the underlying zoning, which means the individual parcels, go through parcel by parcel by parcel and say, okay, this one over here should be residential, and this one here should be business, and this one here should be industrial. We could do that. That would take a lot of time. It would be a very technical exercise, and I would frankly need a subcommittee of residents, hopefully heavily represented by the neighbors of this site, to go through that process parcel by parcel. And then the third option is the overlay district. And like I said, one of the pre-existing overlay districts, like Chestnut Payson or Foxboro Center, could be placed over Neponset Avenue, or a new one could be created, again, depending on what the residents want to see. So those are the options when it comes to zoning. So I just want to get a very, very rough idea from people that are here tonight, just to help guide us, because if this is a futile effort, we want to know about it soon. We're going to continue to make some engagement through social media, through lunch and learns and things like that. But if I want to get an idea at this point, how likely is this that we're going to have something that comes before town meeting? So,
Can I ask a question before you do that?
I'd like to get through this first.
Well, I can't vote until I ask my question.
Okay, what's your question?
Is a commercial and business or commercial the same? Industrial and commercial the same?
So there are a couple different zones that govern each. There's a general industrial and a limited industrial, both of which are present in the surrounding area of Neponset Avenue. The difference is that limited industrial allows for lighter types of industrial uses that don't necessarily involve gears and bubbling vats of chemicals and things like that. When it comes to residential, there are multiple different districts that allow it in multiple ways. Everything from the R40, which is like an agricultural district that requires larger lot sizes and deeper setbacks, to an R15, which is a more historic pattern of density, which is similar to the neighborhoods surrounding this site, and probably would be the one as a planner that I would recommend for this if it is to be changed to residential. But the underlying zoning categories are something that we would address later on if there's appetite to change the zoning in this area.
So what does a business retail fall under?
It could fall under highway business, it could fall under general business, and it's even allowed in general industrial. So it is allowed right now if they wanted to. So there are a bunch of different zones that allow a lot of different activities. Yeah. So show of hands, who here does not want to see the zoning changed along Neponset Avenue after what you've heard tonight? Interesting. Okay. No change. This is raise hands if you don't want any change to the zoning on this area. Okay. Okay, probably about a third. Second option, a series of changes, looking at it parcel by parcel to figure out what you want to change the category to. Hands? Okay, about probably 15-20%. And then finally, the overlay district, which is the comprehensive district level strategy. Okay. So probably the most hands for that one, but you guys are pretty divided. So it's going to be a challenge.
A little more.
Excuse me?
Explain the difference a little more between no zoning change versus overlay district.
Yes.
Sure, no zoning change, everything remains general industrial. So there are uses that are allowed in general industrial. I did print copies of what's allowed in our bylaws for people tonight if they want more information on that. It's also available on the website. There's a QR code on the flyers that were by the door. And you can go on that site and you can look at the list of activities that are allowed in the district as is right now. So you would just be allowed general industrial activities along the corridor if there's no change. Overlay districts are a comprehensive view. It allows for more diverse uses than an individual zone would. So an overlay district in Chestnut Payson, you do have some lighter multifamily options. You do have some commercial options. You have healthcare options. It's a mixture of a lot of different uses, all of which are required. But when it comes to an overlay district, a lot of what's important there is dimensional requirements and how well the uses mesh together. Like I say, you can use one of our existing ones or you can build one from scratch when it comes to overlay districts.
In an overlay district, who decides how much residential versus commercial versus anything else, or is it?
The developers do. Yeah, I mean, you can have a site plan that's associated with it, and typically developers will do that with you, but it's not a requirement necessarily. If it's allowed within the overlay district, it is allowed, and that is absolutely one of the drawbacks to that form.
Didn't the town already make part of the parking lot wetlands again? The back of the parking lot?
Yeah, so wetlands, yes, there are wetlands in this area, and you cannot build on wetlands, but that doesn't mean that there isn't zoning associated with them.
But they made the parking lot wetlands again, right in that picture there.
I mean, I can't tell you exactly where the wetlands lines are because that would be a different map, and I don't have it right in front of me.
I know they changed it. They said
Sure. And wetlands cannot be, they can't be developed.
trees growing in the parking.
There are barriers that you have to respect when it comes to wetlands. So anything that is a wetland, it falls under that category. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have a zone underneath it. Even if it is a wetland, it's zoned general industrial. That doesn't mean it can be developed as general industrial, but I think that we need to consider the entirety of the district as a cohesive whole, even if there are wetlands that we know will never be developed. It's important because wetlands are a small portion of the whole site. Okay, other questions?
I'll take the mic. Stephanie? Oh, don't worry. I can do it. Stephanie
town can change the zoning, but you're talking about us coming up with a plan, which you're explaining the different plans we could, going to town meeting. From then on, we can't just keep changing the zoning. I mean, we have to be realistic. You know, nobody's going to buy that property thinking that they're not going to be able to, you know.
Correct.
And we would love to just have it be green space and ball fields, but the reality is that that's not going to happen.
Right.
Right. So now, if we were to change the zoning, and then this property is up for sale, somebody buys it. We can't just keep coming in and changing the zoning, can we? Or can we?
I mean, any change you make to zoning takes a 2/3 vote, and it has to be done at town meeting. So there's a limited number of opportunities every year to do it. Could you do it again? Yes, you could. But again, it would take a lot of time and effort. And these types of options are not really very successful most of the time.
Well, because I'm just thinking to myself, somebody comes in and buys the property, and this is how it's zoned. So we can just come right in under them and say, oh, we changed our mind. So what somebody bought the property thinking they could do, you can just say, no, we're not doing that. And did you also say that Snyder could just grandfather the property?
Yes.
So if I think my point is, we need to, you know, come up with something that is going to be good for a new buyer, good for the town. Otherwise, Snyder is, if that's going to lock them into who's going to buy this property, they're just going to turn around and grandfather it in, and the whole thing will stay.
Right.
Yes,
this is a private transaction between two people who each want to make money. Schneider Electric wants to recoup some of the cost of the demolition, and the new buyer is going to want to make money with whatever they develop. So yes, that means that we have to be realistic about it. Again, it's a capitalist society. We can't prevent people from building on land that they own, but we can guide that potentially. The second point is, yes, I am saying that they could grandfather that use in no matter what we do, and they could just leave it general industrial no matter what. Does that mean that the residents should just forego any kind of conversation about changing it? I'm not inclined to think so. I want to at least have the conversation with folks. But again, it's up to you all. I have no authority at the end of the day.
Just a quick question about the overlay district, just so I understand. When you asked everyone at the beginning, what did they like, the single families and the dense apartments? And no one really raised their hands for that.
Right.
If we change it to the overlay district, now could it become the dense apartments? Could that be put in there?
If you want to include it in the overlay district, then yes, it would be allowable. It's not allowable right now in the Foxborough Center overlay district. You do have a historic multifamily component that's allowed up to 3 units by right on any given parcel, but you don't allow for like the large scale residential by right. So yeah, the way you design your overlay district can limit uses that you don't want to see, promote uses that you do want to see. But it can be customized.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you first.
Question related to cadmium.
Sure.
Now, this lot of land, or a piece of it, was the source of the cadmium that is now in the reservoir. Now, when Schneider Electric sells this land, are they walking away from their responsibilities with respect to...
That is a great question. That is an excellent question. So they are not allowed to. The polluter pays principle applies in Massachusetts and throughout the country. So because they acquired a company that caused the original damage, they are obligated to maintain whatever environmental protections are necessary to the community around them. So they will be, a lot of you probably noticed there's a little shed now at the far north of Neponset Avenue by Chestnut. That's a water monitoring and treatment hut. So that they will be retaining, Schneider Electric will be retaining that piece of the parcel just to make sure that they have direct control over it, because they're going to need to continue their obligation to prevent anything from getting into streams, brooks, reservoir, etc. But that's a great question. Okay, sure.
Yeah, this contaminated area you refer to, could you show us on the map what it is and define what degree or kind of
Sure.
contamination you refer to?
Sure. So all the portions that have been used as factories are likely contaminated. So and probably ways around them as well. You don't know unless you do soil borings and water testing and such. But this historic building, the one that's still around right now, if you drive up there, you see the old Foxboro Company building is intact. That one very likely has contamination involved, but it's probably of the nature of asbestos, lead, things like that were very common in construction materials prior to a certain point. It probably has some level of TCEs, trichloroethylates as well, which is very common in our region, which can be managed and can be remediated. Buildings like that are restored and reused across the Commonwealth every day. The buildings post-World War II had no architectural merit, and they were much dirtier. That's why they were demolished. That's why the slab remains. Those buildings, like I said, financially, this is the northernmost portion right by the railroad line. That portion is very unlikely to be anything other than industrial, if industrial. You have to meet certain environmental standards in order to allow people to operate for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week on certain sites. So they would have to meet that threshold to be able to develop that site. I don't know if it's possible or not. It's not up to us, right? That's up to the buyer and the seller of the property to figure out if it makes money to redevelop that portion of it. But yes, this whole portion is very contaminated. The flow lab, which is on the southern portion and behind Neponset Avenue on the other side from the railroad tracks, there might be some minor stuff there, but probably not a lot. It's never really been used for intensive manufacturing purposes, to my knowledge at least. Again, if there is contamination, they would need to do soil borings and to prove that that damage is mitigated before they're allowed to build on it.
For that very large slab pointing towards Chestnut Street, you refer to asbestos. The residents there were assured that the demolition company was going to take great care. There really shouldn't be any asbestos there, residual.
Oh, that's in the old building, the one that's still standing. Yeah, there was asbestos there too, yes.
But we were assured that there wouldn't be any asbestos. They took great care of it.
Right, so they have to spray down any buildings that have asbestos because it's an airborne concern. So they do that during the demolition process to prevent asbestos from leaving the site. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't asbestos in the building itself. But there are precautions that are taken when you're demolishing a structure with asbestos. But it's done all the time, so people know how to do it pretty well. You have a licensed site professional, which is like an environmental scientist that oversees what's done on all those sites, and their license depends on. All right. Okay. All right. Sure. Okay. All right. Let's go way in the back because you've had your hand up for a while. Sorry.
Basically high-density residential.
Mm-hmm.
And in the event that happens, what are we going to do about the people who already live in the immediate area of water and electric provisions as well as property taxes?
Sure. Property taxes are something that's factored in after development. I'll answer that piece of the question first. You can't really determine property taxes on anything that's built until after it's built. Then our assessor goes out and takes the measurements they need to determine the obligation of that individual property. But going back to your first question, when it comes to an overlay district and how it relates to 40B, they're very separate organisms. When you're under a threshold of affordable housing in Massachusetts, developers can take an abbreviated approval process directly to the state government, and that pushes people away from the local regulations, and it makes the process easier for the developer. The communities just have to accept it, basically. We're above that threshold. So any kind of 40B project that might come to the town would have to go through the friendly process, which we discussed earlier, and thank you, Paige, for answering that one since I did not know it. Is it a possibility in this site? Not really, to be honest with you. There are certain types of uses that are allowed, even in industrial uses, and that would be like senior housing, but it would be limited to that type of development.
I live on Chestnut Street, so most of my experience is with the overlay district at Chestnut Street, and that's been there for 15 years. And I never realized that part of that development would be a town dump. And if anyone is not familiar with what a town dump is, they can go over to our beautiful fire station, police station, 9/11 Memorial, and look right across the street from the front door of the fire station. And 5 years ago, the town allowed, during COVID, a beer garden to go in there. Now you've got wires in there, electrical, whatever, dumping in there. And here's an overlay district, 15 years, and one of the parcels is just sitting there as a town dump. So when you think of overlay districts, when you drive by the fire station, glance to your left, and take in the town dump.
That's a really good comment. All I will say on that, because I'm not familiar with the situation, I have seen the debris. It shouldn't exist, to be honest with you, because that's
Beautiful, a walkway in
Yeah.
there with some benches and tree and tied the whole relatively together. 15 years it sat there done.
Yeah, I mean, typically that sort of use is acceptable during a construction phase, but not where it is now. I'll have to talk with our building commissioner about that to figure out what's going on and what, if any, accommodations have been made that probably shouldn't have. But I'm not familiar enough with the situation to speak on it right now. But thank you for making me aware of it.
Thank you. Can you remind us what the schedule is? So we're
Sure.
having this conversation in terms of consensus building, and you have a process. What have they communicated to you in terms of this phase?
Sure.
And when they open the conversation for bids? And I'm also interested in how long they're going to extend the bid process.
Yeah.
How long they'll take for evaluation. And then at that point, is there any point in there in which the town is able to view sort of the finalists and give some feedback? That would be really helpful.
Yeah, so the question for those that couldn't hear it is, what is the timeline for development of the site? As of right now, Schneider Electric is not yet looking actively for buyers that I'm aware of anyway. What they've told me is that they're in the middle of a real estate study to figure out what the most lucrative end use of the land would be under this model or any potential future models. I haven't been given a time frame for when they're going to release the land for bid. My guess would be if they're doing the study now, it would be sometime around town meeting in autumn, which is why we need to have the conversation now. Next year, assuming they find a buyer, typically in a situation like this, there's a purchase and sale agreement. And that's a document that says, yes, we want to buy this land, but we need to get our permits. We need to make sure that if there are tax credits or whatever we need from the state, that we have those in hand. We're not going to close until we do. So usually they put down a whole bunch of money, like upfront, to say, yes, I'm really interested, let's sign this agreement. And then they're free to have access to the site to do the work that they need to when it comes to environmental stuff, when it comes to money stuff. Usually those purchase and sale agreements for a property of this size, it will take years, and it will probably be done in phases. Just as an example, a purchase and sale agreement that I've been actively associated with in the past, one of them lasted 4 years, one of them lasted 2 years, and one of them lasted 6 months. So it's across the board, but they're probably not going to have somebody who just pays them cash up front and the land is theirs.
And at what point in that process during P&S is the public made aware? Is that something that is made for public scrutiny or just journalists?
Because we're not a party in the transaction, they don't need to tell us unless they're coming for permits. They'll be coming for permits during that due diligence period after the purchase and sale agreement is signed, and that's usually when we're made aware of it. But we might not know who the buyer is until months after that purchase and sale agreement is signed. Yeah.
At what point, so you're talking about Schneider grandfathering into industrial, and I guess what I'm curious about is that a benefit that extends to the buyer as well, and if not, when do they need to elect to grandfather if they're choosing to do that?
Yeah, it does extend, unless the land use changes at any point in time, and it could change to something else through like a variance or whatever the process might be, right? Unless the property is actively being used in a different manner, that ability to grandfather the use in will continue to exist. So it will probably be the case for this entire parcel. or parcel, property.
And so the follow-up to that is the town could then elect to zone differently in any one of the ways you've talked about, and that might entice a different kind of buyer, but
Right.
Schneider Electric and their buyer, at their sole discretion, regardless of what the town zones or doesn't, can still choose to be industrial for as long as it's
Correct. Yeah, and that would be the safe route for them. The safe route for them is to find a buyer that's interested in only industrial or general industrial zoned uses, which there's still a variety of uses you can build in general industrial, but that's the safe option for them. They're open to listening to the community, though. They have told me that. That doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily give up their ability to grandfather in that use, but they are very curious. They're going to remain a Foxboro company. They don't necessarily want their neighbors to all be upset at them. So they are interested in what the residents decide to do with zoning, and it will send them a very strong message about the future development along the corridor.
On your little picture sheet, you forgot about medical.
Medical, yes.
Right, medical, they should, invite doctors and stuff there. No one's closed. You got a sturdy, forget about it, it's all Rhode Island people there. You go over to Brockton, okay, that's a dump, both hospitals. Or you go to Milford, that's a little distance. So I think medical should be priority. They should have 2 stories, okay? Put a brick to look like the other section that's going to remain, and have like restaurants, like a Blue Ribbon barbecue or package store, and all the stuff in the bottom, and have doctor's offices up above, so after your appointment you can get something to eat or drink.
Sure.
Yeah, medical, you forgot about this.
Yeah, so medical is an office use, and office uses are allowed in a lot of different zones within Foxborough. So you can take a look. Is medical, or is office space allowed in general industrial? I don't think it is, but we'll give it a look. But I know it's allowed in several other zones that we can consider as part of this. It's a great idea to look at medical.
It would be nice. Nobody
Yeah.
can complain.
It is usually, it is allowed, good. So it is allowed right now under general industrial, office space is. Dimensional requirements will probably be a little bit of a challenge, just because the zoning doesn't just govern what can go in a place, it also governs how it can be constructed. So we might need to look at whether or not the style of building that we allow in general industrial is conducive to medical, but that's a different conversation. That would be less of a tweak, yeah.
Would you say to change zoning to
I can't hear you, unfortunately.
to change zoning to 2/3 town vote? Is that literally the residents at that town meeting? 2/3 those that are.
Yes. The question was, is it literally 2/3 of all residents that are present at town meeting? And that's what we need to change the zoning. The answer is yes. That's why this is a very difficult prospect, and I need to have a good idea of whether or not it's worth the effort to make.
I just wondered if the like toxic section in the north section, can that be made a parking lot or no?
Parking lots are allowed in general industrial. They're allowed in pretty much any zone that you come up with, yeah.
I know you said that the Schneider wants to limit the number of parties buying the property, but to what extent are they allowed to split it up for sale? My concern here is that the part that's a slab remains a slab, they split off the other areas for sale first.
Yeah, and they can decide how to sell their land off. Anybody that owns a parcel of land can sell that one parcel of land. So, I don't remember exactly how many parcels are in this, but there are a lot.
The lines that are drawn on that map.
Yes, the yellow, no, because this is, yes, you're right, yes. So it's probably a little over a dozen parcels. So they could chunk them off. They could also Form A them. They could submit a request to us that they want to subdivide their parcels, and our office reviews it, and as long as it meets state and local regulations, we allow them to do so. So they could even split it further if they want to.
So what can be done? I know you said that the town is not interested in being part of the sale, but what can be done at the town level, and what is, if anything, being considered to help incentivize that possibility of playing out where the slab remains a slab, the rest of it's developed?
Sure, that's a really good question. What can we do to incentivize the slab remaining a slab and the rest of it being developed? I think that the property itself kind of does that, to be honest. It has a big red flag on it that says, "Don't touch me," pretty much. You could probably put a really heavy-duty industrial use on there with, like, you know, fans and filters and things like that that make sure that the workers are safe during the work day. But it would never be anything other than industrial, would be my guess. Again, this is my guess. If they have all the money on earth, they can clean it up to put whatever they want there. But yeah, we don't really have a lot of incentives that we can offer as a town. There are a couple of abatement programs, but I don't think that the town would be, just knowing Foxborough the way I do, I don't think that they'd be too receptive to using like a job creation type of tax abatement to prohibit development in a place. That would be a different sort of incentive than how it's typically applied, and I don't think there would be too much appetite for it. But we don't have a lot of tools for attraction or anything.
So, less a question and more of a statement, but the cost of the land, you could really forecast what a developer could profit from based on the raw cost of the land. So, for instance, we're discussing the concrete pad. It's cost prohibitive to destroy that and put it into a new use. So it's, you know, you can attract people with honey rather than the vinegar theory. We could, if we had a mixed-use overlay where the parking lots that are there now have the best potential for a residential purpose, the industrial portion, you know, profitability-wise, would be an industrial portion. The existing historic building, like the Mansfield Chocolate Factory, could potentially be commercial office space on the first level, second and third level, which is a fair enough distance away from the tracks, could potentially be developed into apartment buildings or lower cost units, whereas across the street could be single-family private homes on small lots, provided that the septic systems could handle that. But really our only options are based upon the zoning issue and finding, maybe even working with Schneider to help us encourage that in a sale. Typically, if it's a residential and commercial purposes, you're going to have a team of developers, and the residential developer will take care of that portion. In a commercial, they do not work together. Commercial property development is very different from residential property.
Yeah.
But like somebody was saying about the school systems, if we have a mixed use, you are limiting a concentration of any one of those industries.
Yes.
The advantage to having retail and residential mixed together is that you have a permanent purchasing base within a walking distance, and it makes it a walkable. They're going to encourage sidewalks and grass and trees and open spaces because people live there. If it's strictly a shopping strip mall, it's going to look like the Ocean State job lot, which unless you're going there for a purpose, you don't go there.
Yeah.
Despite there being a lot of land that surrounds it that is wooded. If you encourage the zoning that would make it profitable for a developer to parcel the land out himself, but do it in such a way that does not concentrate anyone. We do not want say for instance, a Walmart superstore warehouse on that street because, well, you can imagine, just the Amazon delivery, the amount of traffic that is on small residential streets now. We're just doing right now on Market Street. I live on Rockville Street. There's a tremendous amount of traffic, and surprisingly, the streets get destroyed with that amount of traffic. And it doesn't do anything for the residents who are already there and are grandfathered in as a residential that is basically surrounded by an existing Foxborough County.
Yeah.
So I think our power lies in encouraging this mixed-use overlay district that doesn't allow a concentration of any one of the zoning, but does encourage like what people really want. We won't get a park out of it, not unless Schneider is going to be a philanthropist. But we could, by just zoning it in such a way that discourages the concentration of any one thing, I think it would encourage a developer to sort of, work with us. Especially if we can have Schneider do it prior to sale and have him market that and have him spend that money on finding a developer. Because this is it's a $1 billion development, say.
Yes, easily.
Years to develop and pass the EPA requirements. I'm on the board of advisory committee here in Foxborough, So we have worked in these overlay districts,
Mm-hmm.
and Bob Kraft is looking for a way to put residences over his shopping plaza because nobody shops there.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the stadium in such proximity, and there is a hospital right next door. So there are downsides and upsides to each thing, but
Sure.
I think in my personal opinion, a developer is only going to want to look at that if he has the maximum amount of options in order to make a profit.
And
at the end of the day, the only person
that's
who's
true.
going to buy it is somebody who makes a profit.
So that you said a lot, but a lot of it is very sound planning practice. I think a lot of people will always say that they don't want to see multifamily at all because it's lower income and it ruins the character of a neighborhood. But nobody has ever gone up to Boylston and said, "Wow, look at all these slobs living along Boylston Street," or Beacon Hill, So yeah, there are ways to build it that attract wealth and attract value, and like you say, it has to be a mixture of uses because Boylston isn't just residential, it's intimately entwined with the retail and the institutions that line it. Educational, cultural, etc. So yes, 100% that's really sound planning practice, and it's very sound from a municipal budget perspective is the balancing of uses. All of you live somewhere. Chances are you don't pay as much in taxes as you require in services, or when your kids were in school, or whatever the case may be, when you're sick and calling the squad a lot. But we need those services, and a community needs to provide them. They're good services in and of themselves. You offset the costs of the residential units by adding in industrial, by adding in commercial. So from like a fiscal budget perspective, from the town writ large, it's very, very much that's what the town aims to do when they look at their budget and how they should develop. You've been waiting for a long time, yes.
Catherine, thank you. I think you've run a very good meeting. Is your goal of this presentation, and whatever number of slides you have left,
This is it.
to pick one of the three options
Mm-hmm.
and go in that direction, or just feel it out? And what I'm getting at is the tail wagging the dog on the timer on this? I think Angela mentioned something to that effect. And also, we have, in a year's time, the soccer championship, the FIFA championship. We have a railroad line there, and we have the 800-pound gorilla that one might call the MBTA, which isn't exactly a cheerful acronym right now to some people in town. Do we need to make this decision by fall because our town is back to the wall? Because there's a lot of good faith here, I think, between the existing ownership of Schneider Electric, the company which can sell, right? I'm not making
Right, yeah.
right? But, I kind of feel like I didn't come here tonight to vote on 1 on 3,
No.
and I mean that respectfully. But now I'm like, well, geez, I need to think about this a little bit because I'm
Yeah.
not the brightest bulb on the tree.
No, the purpose of tonight.
I know what you want out of this meeting.
Sure.
We can talk to Sunday.
The purpose of the meeting tonight was so that I could get a general gauge of people's thoughts as to which way the town should go. It's not the end point.
It's not binding.
It's not binding. Nothing that you're doing or saying tonight is binding, because part of what I wanted to do was explain to people what exactly was happening on Neponset Avenue and the town's role in it, since, like I say, a lot of people thought that the town would be buying and building stuff there, and we're not. A lot of people don't understand zoning. It's a technical discipline, so I wanted people to understand at least a portion of it as it affects this site, and what we can do. But no, so the timeline is a little bit more challenging. The first part of your question is more challenging. Do we have to do something by November? I don't know. I don't think so. Like I say, these purchase and sale agreements typically take a long time to come to fruition with anything. But I would imagine that Schneider Electric would have at least one buyer on the hook by the time of spring town meeting, and it would be very helpful to the future buyer as well as to Schneider to know the residents' thoughts before then. So ideally, I would like to have a feeling as to the consensus of the residents before autumn. That doesn't mean that we can't bring something to next spring's town meeting. We can bring something to annual town meeting as well, if that's the path that we end up taking. But it's very helpful to me to just learn more about, what are people's absolute hard stops, and I've heard a lot of those tonight. What are people's gut feeling as to, like, is it even worthwhile to get this done? And honestly, from the hands that were raised, I saw about 30% of people want to keep zoning as is. That bodes pretty poorly for any changes at town meeting if the vote were to be taken today. But again, a lot of you are just now getting educated as to like what's happening here and what are some of the parameters that the town has to operate under. So that could change in the coming months. From my perspective, I think this is too important to not bring to residents. I don't have a dog in this fight. Like, the easy thing for me to do would be not to have a meeting, just let the sale go through and let the developers come to us and request zoning changes at town meeting as they decide to build things. But I don't think that that's the moral path to take as a planner. I think that would be malpractice. So that's why I want to come to you in advance to see if there's room for a change. But either way that you go, I'm not emotionally invested in it, you know? So,
how are you going to educate people that aren't here?
So that's a great question too. We have a wonderful GIS specialist who has left, unfortunately, but he created a website with a lot of maps and a lot of information that's on the flyers by the front entrance. There's a QR code there. If you don't have QR code access, I have my contact information. I can always send you the link. But that website has a wealth of information, including the maps that are here in more detail, and some sliders where you can see like what would it look like to have different industrial uses on top of that cement slab? What would it look like if one of the parking lots were to become like a mixed-use walkable area with like a patio? He created a lot of that for us just so that residents can see things in the flesh, because sometimes when you're talking about parcels and zoning, it's hard to really picture what the future could look like. So we're going to try to do things that way. There's also a survey there. So people who aren't present tonight, it's at the very bottom of the page because we're really hoping that people will at least read half of it before they take the survey so that they better understand like what the town can do and what we can't do. So hopefully that information will get out to residents who aren't here tonight.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, that gentleman was so clearly so well spoken, who's on the advisory committee. But what he was talking about was having a overlay, like a comprehensive purchase, and leaving the developers decide what they put where. And I feel that's very dangerous. And I know not many people voted for having a committee that determine what zones we want to go where.
Mm-hmm.
But I really feel that that's the only way that the town has any control.
Sure.
And so I wanted to to say that, because you said before, once you give it to a developer, they can do what they want.
Yeah.
Once you say that it's going to be that type of district, whoever purchases it and has free reign to mix up and put wherever they want.
Yeah.
This is an unbelievably flat, beautiful site close to town, and they could do anything. So I really feel that we should have a committee that looks at it and suggests this is what we're going to do.
Sure. So we might do something that's hybrid. I need to think about this because I'm getting a lot of input tonight. So unfortunately in Massachusetts, you don't have access to some of the planning options that you have in other states. I really, really wish that we could do like a planned unit development, which is like a comprehensive plan that we develop in tandem with whoever the buyer or seller might be, in this case a seller, that drills down a little bit further into the use. We don't have that option here. We don't have that luxury. So overlay districts can serve as a guide, but we can't tell people where within the overlay district they're allowed to build this thing that they're allowed to build. If it's allowed, they can build it wherever the market conditions and transportation and everything else makes sense. They still have to go through the process with us. We still have to make sure that they have safe ingress and egress and adequate parking spaces and all that. They don't get away with that. Like, just because it's by right doesn't mean that we just allow them to build whatever they want. We still have some control, but and unfortunately, the way that Massachusetts regulations are set up, we don't have the ability to really like dig in and have a plan that is enforceable for the site.
So they could say that I'm going to put in 70% residential and only 30% commercial.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I do want to respect people's time because a lot of folks are already heading out. So how about 2 more questions and then we can go? Sure.
So
Do you want the mic?
I just want to address this today.
I'm Kate Duncan, the town manager. Used to have this job, right now that I don't. I just want to bring a little bit of reasonableness to this, what Kevin was saying, what Steph was saying, and I hear what you're saying, Kay. But what we have to remember is right now they have by right industrial uses. So regardless of what happens, regardless of what this town does, they can actually do what they want within the confines of what Catherine mentioned. So I think we're going to get a lot farther if there are changes we envision by working with them. If we take a very slow pace and we put up a bunch of barriers and they're anxious to sell, they might just say, all right, well, this is going to be really complicated. Let's just go with what we know. We know the industrial user is the way to go. We can just get an Amazon warehouse in there. We're good to go. So we might lose out the opportunity for a planning process. So I don't want to say that we don't have any planning process, but I don't know that we do have a luxury of a lot of time. And I think the time is not in our favor. They can grandfather, like I said, they can do they hold the cards here. They have come to us, though, and made it clear that they'd love to find a project that the community would like, that they obviously have to go back to shareholders and explain that it's profitable. So that's that balancing act. So I just want to make sure that we're reasonable, that you're right, you don't want to lose anything, but you're talking about something we might already have lost. I mean, if they want to throw up a trucking terminal, or I think that's a special.
Well, yeah, that's special. But we can't deny it.
Certain uses that none of us really want to see, they could do it today. So I think we're going to go a lot farther, and that's why Catherine's worked so hard on this, is to show that we do have an interest. And I think the turnout here is fabulous, and we'll just continue to have a conversation with them about it and try to craft a vision that the community can live with, but also financially will allow them to make a sale. And I do think they might not go for only top dollar if they know it's going to be a fight. They might say, well, it might be, $500,000 less or $2 million less, but we know we don't have to spend 3 years in court. So there's some balancing act there. There's no one answer, but it is a challenge to think that we hold the cards.
Yeah. So one more comment. Who wants to be the final word here tonight? All right, Paul.
To tell you the truth, Jack Martin had his hand up, and I always want to hear what he says. So can you make it 1.5?
Sure. Sure. 1.5. All right.
Somebody in the past labeled 6 or 8 or 10 buildings that are haphazardly attached together right in the middle of this plot as historic and therefore can't be touched. Is that correct? Or does the town and the state, for example, control what can be historically removed? And in my view, all 10 of those buildings are historic.
Sure.
But somebody might say that.
Sure. So that's probably in this cluster that's not owned by Schneider Electric, because none of the Schneider Electric land that they're putting up for sale is historic, aside from the older building, and I don't even think that has a designation. Yeah. So I don't think that has an official designation. I think they kept it intact because they think that there's value there that a future buyer might want.
So they're only looking at 1 or 2 buildings as being historic, and the others were left for other reasons.
Right. Yeah, demolishing sometimes more expensive than it's worth, especially for a seller. So, all right, so that's it. Thank you all for coming out. It was great to see such a big turnout.